Now, the conflict in Yemen itself has pretty much a 30-year history of where Yemen has had instability, violence, revolts in this country, and it's just plagued with multifaceted internal and external problems. And these have been over decades consistent in the country of Yemen itself. I'm showing you a map of the north and the south, and the fragmented military force area, because the Al Houthis occupy the south, and they have definitely been responsible for an enormous amount of uprising and violence in Yemen. Al Qaeda, as I'm sure you've heard much about over the news, is based in Al Mukalla, and they are another opposing force in Yemen that has been tremendously responsible as well for consistent violence in the country. To understand the violence and conflict that has been going on in Yemen, it's important for me to bring up to your attention several of the significant leaders. First leader ruled from 1904 to 1948 was Imam Yahya, and he was part of the Zadits community in northern Yemen. Very important leader to Yemen, because he established the Treaty of Tarif in 1934. And this treaty was important in the uniting of the Islamic Arab nations and raising the condition and maintaining prestige and independence for the country. Um, it's very important, and we can also learn that the Saudi Arabian neighbors were significantly interested in the Treaty of 1934, because it confirmed and established security needs and preventing them from being at risk. The next very important significant leader for Yemen is Ali Abdullah Saleh. President Ali Abdullah Saleh is very important in that he established unification with the Kuwait Agreement for Yemen. He was named president in 1978, and at that time he was president of Yemen Arab Republic in North Yemen. Within the year 1979, he managed to bring both the North and the South together. He established the Kuwaiti Agreement, and hence he continued to be elected as president by different constituents of the political arena, up until he actually served 33 years. And he wasn't taken out of office until, and he didn't leave his office rather, until 2011, when missiles were launched at the presidential palace. He was injured and he had to leave for his recovery and healing. However, he did come back in 2012, at which time the parliament gave him complete immunity and asked President Salah to step down, at which point he was asked to hand over his presidency to his then vice president, Abdul Rabu Mansour Hadi, and he did so. And President Salah went to America um, to get treated and healed and received medical attention. He returned in 2012 to his residence in Sana'a. He remained a very important political figure for Yemen, even as an ex-president. The next slide, I want to give you an overview of Ali Abdullah Salah's, of some of his accomplishments. As I said earlier, he was one of the most important presidents in Yemen's history as he served for 33 years. But he was a very astute a military man. He joined the Army in 1958. In 63, he was commissioned as a second lieutenant in the Army. He participated in a coup in 74, in which he established a 10-member military command council. In 94, he captured Aden and he ended the Civil War. Also, in 2011, that is when he transferred his power to President Abdul Rabu Mansur Hadi, as I've shared with you before. And in 2014, something very surprising happened, and that is when ex-President Salah established his alliance with the Houthis. The pictures to the left shows President Salah and before he was injured in the insurgents against his palace, and the picture at the bottom does show him after he had been injured and medically treated. Our next very important leader was President Abdul Rabbah Mansur Hadi. President Hadi came in office in February of 2012, and after he came into office in 2012, he was served a 2-year term, and he actually resigned and fled the country. In 2015. He didn't get to live out his term because of the fact that people were so outraged at him being placed into the presidency that he fled for his life, and still in fear for his life, he hasn't returned. He is currently considered the president of Yemen by the Saudi and its Gulf allies and by the Western powers. Houthis and the ex-president Saleh. The ex-president Saleh joined, as I said to you earlier, the alliance again in 2014 with the now leader of the Houthis, Abdul Malik Badr al-Houthi. He is the current leader, and he and President Saleh are currently leading from the province of Seda, which is on the Red Sea. The Houthis adhere to the Zaidi Shia sect, and they are indigenous people to Yemen. Many think that they're intruders or invaders, and don't even realize that they are actually indigenous people for Yemen, and Yemen is their home country. At this point, I'd like to say a bit about the warring factions in Yemen. As you can see, a visual, we have a picture of the ex-president Salah. He has joined in with the now Houthi leader, Abdul Malik Barad al-Houthi. They are now working in cahoots together as warring factions to President Hadi, as well as the Saudi Arabian king, who is an ally with President Hadi, and the Gulf states, the U.S., and NATO. It's important for us to know that these are actually the main warring factions. Many people want to know about the Houthis and who they are. As I told you earlier, they are the indigenous people for Yemen. They're not outsiders or intruders, as many have sadly mistaken. They began as a movement called Believing Youth. It was a summer educational program, something very simple to promote the Zaidis' belief in their culture. And over the years, they turned into a very fierce and violent Houthi movement. It's important also to note that the Zaidis, they believe intrinsically that the Islamic government should be ruled by an imam, and also that imam must be Sayyid, which means a member of the family of Prophet Muhammad, or his family line. Okay, now we want to talk about President Hadi, Saudi Arabia, and the Gulf states, which the Gulf states are known as the Arab Coalition. And they've been working together to restore President Hadi to power in Yemen since 2015. A lot of the effort by the King of Saudi Arabia has been tied in with Yemeni domestic politics since the 30s, 1930s, and the importance of the agreement of Tarif in 1934 originated a lot from Saudi Arabian leadership. It's also important for you to know that United Arab Emirates is the second largest heavy contender in the Arab coalition. And since 2015, there's been a campaign against Yemen um, led by the Saudi Arabians. That was the air campaign. And Saudi Arabia is responsible for 90% of the air campaign that's now happening in the wars in in Yemen. Now we come to Al Qaeda. As you saw on the map earlier, Al Qaeda is located in South Yemen, and they occupy Al Mukula territory. They are one of the most violent and chaotic uh, enemies that have been causing strife and consistent problems in Yemen. They've been a menace to the Republic of Yemen since 1990s. They really have kind of taken advantage of the war situation and become antagonists because they have an opportunity to do that. Um, Also, now there is a full-blown civil war in Yemen as a result of lots of the Al-Qaeda activity. And as you may have heard on your regular daily news, the United States is holding an ongoing air campaign that targets Al-Qaeda in the country of Yemen. So, in all of this confusion and war and strife and hatred and bitterness, there has to be someone that becomes the peacemaker. And you can look at the United Nations involvement as the peacemaker. The United Nations has assigned a special envoy to Yemen, and that is in the presence of Mr. Ismail Ould Sheikh Ahmed. He has become responsible for holding the next round of peace negotiations scheduled for July 15, 2016 in Kuwait, in the city of Kuwait. And that is a very important peace effort that is being made by the United Nations. So as we come to a close in this presentation of the conflict and Saudi Arabia's involvement in the Yemeni domestic politics, I want to remind you again about a few important events that have occurred. And as I told you earlier, in the 30s, the most important event was the 1934 Al Tarif Treaty. It became a very significant accomplishment of President Yahya. Also, from 62 to 70, we are looking at the Yemeni civil war, a lot of crisis, lot of deaths, consistently amount of lives being lost during that civil war. And it didn't stop there. In the 90s, the Yemeni second civil war resulted in Yemen's unification. And again, we can hold the leadership of President Ali Abdullah Saleh responsible for that. Not only is he responsible for that unification that no other president has accomplished. In 2004, there was a Yemeni third civil war between the Houthis and President Ali Abdullah Saleh. At that point, we see that he was in opposition to the Houthis and very much determined to take them out as opponents of the country of Yemen. However, it's ironic to know that in 2015, ex-President Saleh decided that he would be once again an ally with the with he began to become an ally with the Houthis, which is something that is very interesting. And also that for 2015 there is a current campaign in Saudi Arabia and its allies, and they're working with the Arab coalition to establish peace in Yemen. That is the real focus at this point, is to end the years of the war and violent conflict and bring peace to the Yemeni community. And I've given you a visual of the Arab coalition. They are very united and very much strong in favor of being the allies with Yemen. And I would like, and with all this peace effort, it's important to know that the conflict does continue. Since 2015, the conflict has continued. I've given you a graphic for meditation and in your observation and consideration for the who's for and who's against in the situation going on in Yemen. You see that there's military support from Saudi Arabia, as well as the countries that are leading in the coalition, and there's other support also that you don't hear mentioned very often. But again, we still have the opposing military action from Iran, China, and Russia, and so let's remember that as we consider the entire presentation. Thank you very much for your attention, and once again, looking at the conflict that continues in Yemen.
This week in Yemen, a group of rebels from the Houthi minority staged an alleged coup. Some fear that the resulting power vacuum will also lead to increased al-Qaeda activity in the region. So what is Yemen's civil unrest about, and why is terrorism thriving there? Yemen is the poorest country in the Middle East. Around half the population lives below the poverty line. There are few jobs to be had and food is expensive, which prompts unrest among the general population. The Houthi group in northwestern Yemen is one group pushing for change. They belong to an offshoot of Shiite Islam known as Zaydism, while the majority of Yemen is Sunni. However, their criticism of the government has drawn local support from some Sunni Muslims. The Houthis are armed and have significant political bargaining powers because they control large sections of northern Yemen. In September of 2014, Houthi leaders agreed to a ceasefire so long as the Yemeni government was willing to adjust the country's constitution to include more political representation for minority groups like them. But in December of 2014, the Houthis rejected a new draft of the constitution, feeling that it didn't do enough to address their needs. They've kidnapped the president's chief of staff and took control of the state TV. They also took over the presidential palace and surrounded the home of the prime minister. Now the country may be on the brink of an all-out civil war, and the political turmoil is benefiting terrorist groups. Yemen is home to one of the most dangerous networks, Al-Qaeda in the Arab Peninsula, or AQAP. AQAP has claimed responsibility for the Charlie Hebdo shootings and reportedly inspired 2 attacks on America. AQAP is on the rise in Yemen for many reasons, one of which is the fact that both the Yemeni government and the Houthi rebels, who are normally fighting AQAP, are instead fighting each other. Meanwhile, Al-Qaeda forces are gaining ground elsewhere in Yemen. Terrorist groups flourish in political chaos, and turmoil in Yemen makes it easier for AQAP to recruit and train new soldiers. The U.S. has vested interest in keeping Yemen out of the hands of terrorists. The Long War Journal reports that they have made more than 100 drone strikes there since 2002. And since 2011, they've reportedly provided Yemen with nearly $1 billion in economic, military, and humanitarian aid. However, this has had a little effect on the political unrest in the country. Interested in the politics of the Middle East? Check out these videos on why India and Pakistan hate each other and what the Taliban wants in Pakistan. Thanks for watching TestTube. Please subscribe.